Okay, so hey everybody, welcome to Publishing Disrupted podcast again. My name is Mick Silva.
And I'm literary agent and publisher David Morris, and you're an editor, Nick Silva.
I always forget that part. Yes, I am an editor, and we are exploring the ways in which book publishing is changing and trying to help authors navigate that change. And so I mean, we always start with something like, "What's new?" What's going on with you? I could start. I basically am trying to stay out of trouble this summer and take it easy, not work too hard. I was talking last time about like taking walks and enjoying the
Yep,
change,
yep.
nature that's happening around our yard. And so I'm trying to garden and be calm and relaxed and not get too ambitious, especially during the summer when we all try to take vacations. But I've got my Frog and Toad shirt on honor of Pride Month, as Marla Tabiano pointed out, the
What does it
author.
say? Toad
Uh, Toad and
sat
Toad
and did
sat and
nothing.
did nothing. Frog sat with him.
There Perfect.
Reminds
Yes.
just relax, be calm. It's
Yeah.
good.
There's so
I mean,
many
I'm generally, but it helps to
yeah.
be reminded.
So many things you can always be doing in publishing. It's like there's never enough to get done, or you feel like you're never enough sometimes. I think that's one of the big challenges because the editing could always be more, the marketing could always be more, the dollars could always be more for sure. So,
Or-
yeah, you feel it. You do feel it. And, you got to let it go too
Yeah,
sometimes, put it down.
yeah, and you wear a lot of hats. I know as a publisher, and
Yeah, I
kind of,
definitely feel it. I got to be
yeah.
careful. Yeah.
So
Well,
yeah,
well, today we are joined by another person who's already nodding away about some of these things. Another publishing person, Audrey Clare Farley. Thanks for joining, Audrey. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. I'm excited to be here.
So I have
yeah.
a little bio. We're excited to have you here. Um, I have a little bio here for you. I would like to read, and you can comment on it if you want to. But Audrey, I mean, I'm really excited about this, listeners. Audrey is really one of the most qualified, and I'm not trying to butter you up, Audrey, but the word brilliant actually works for you. And I really think Audrey is somebody whose books, whose work you should get to know. Audrey is an author, editor, and literary scholar. After earning a PhD in English literature, she turned to creative nonfiction, writing two books, The Unfit Heiress and Girls and Their Monsters. The latter won the Michigan Notable Book Award, where we are in Michigan. Audrey's in Pennsylvania. The latter won the Michigan Notable Book Award and was named a New York Times editor's pick. Farley currently teaches part-time at Mount St. Mary's University in Pennsylvania and leads creative writing workshops for Narratively Academy, something you should look up, where she has helped many authors to develop book ideas. She's most interested in narrative nonfiction, especially memoir, biography, history, and cultural criticism. Did I get all that right? Is everything in Pennsylvania that I said was in Pennsylvania?
No, actually, the university is in Maryland, but I'll
Got it.
forgive you for that.
I thought maybe that was off, but you are in Pennsylvania. There's that
Yes, I
part.
am.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there's parts of Maryland that sort of stretch over,
exactly.
like this very skinny part of Maryland, right? Or am I thinking of West Virginia? No, it's
No,
Maryland.
you're right.
Yeah,
You're right. You're right.
yeah. You could be, like, in Pennsylvania, drive through Maryland, and be in, like, Virginia or,
Very quickly.
very
Yeah.
quickly.
Yep.
Um, yeah, well, it's been great to get to know Audrey myself, through we first met online, I think, in the sort of evangelical Twitter days, and,
Yes. I'm
connected
not an
there.
evangelical, but I was interested in that space. I was writing about it for the New Republic. And so that is, I think, how I connected with you. And then I did a little bit of work for you for Lake Drive,
Right, right.
and we stayed in touch.
Yeah. And, so you have been, a professor or
Mhm.
instructor part-time, um, a writer almost full-time, it seems. Let's not forget mom and family person, raising a few kids, couple kids,
Mhm.
and um, you've also been, and you just mentioned it, you've been submitting articles out there too.
Yeah, not as much lately.
Where have you
Just
been published in the past?
I have written for The Atlantic, The New York Times, The Washington Post, and I've done most of my work for The New Republic. Now, freelance work like the wider publishing industry is a crapshoot. It's very
Yeah,
little pay for a lot of work. So the more that I've gotten bylines, the less pressure I feel to be doing it. So I probably only do a few stories
yeah.
a year,
Do
just
those
because
wind
they
up?
are so time intensive.
Yeah, yeah. Do those wind up being in print or just online only? Some of them.
Mostly just online.
Interesting. Yeah, that's what
Yeah,
I thought. I don't think writers quite realize that a lot of publishing goes on only online,
that's right.
but it's still a byline.
It is. Yes,
Yeah.
and I'm grateful for them. I'm glad to have them. I just don't feel pressured to chase them anymore.
Did you have those bylines before you got your first major book deal or after?
Um, that's a good question. I think I had 1 or 2. And actually the book deal grew out of an article. So my first book was about the heiress Anne Cooper Hewitt, whose mother had her forcibly sterilized back in the early 1900s, and it sparked this very sensational case. It was like a kind of Kardashians, the mom and daughter fighting in public. And, I wrote a story about it for Narratively, and it very quickly went viral, and it caught the attention of a prominent actor who was interested in the film rights, and so it was her people that actually connected me with my literary agent.
Wow, what a path
And
to publishing. Huh.
yeah, especially because I had queried a ton of people already with that story. And, it hadn't really gone anywhere. So I do wonder, if it hadn't been for the article, would it have ended up a book? I don't know, but it goes to show how hard it really is to get out of the slush pile.
Did it end up a film as well?
No, so, supposedly it's still in development, it moves very slowly. I don't know if anything will happen. I if it does, that's great, but I'm not really expecting it.
Yeah,
So
certainly an intriguing story.
Yeah.
so you didn't start out and go, "I'm gonna write a book about this, about
Well,
Cooper
I
Hewitt."
wanted to write a book, and I was kind of, like, feeling around for what topic could get me a book, because at that point in my life, I'd recently graduated with a PhD, but I didn't have a tenure track job. My family had moved back to our hometown, for other reasons, and so I was kind of looking for a second act, like, "Okay, I'm not gonna be a tenure track professor, I've gotta do something else." Wanted to write a book, was feeling around for things, um, so, yeah, I was very grateful that this did take off, and I was able to get my foot in the door.
So what led you to like tell us about Audrey Farley? Like what
Mhm.
leads her to be interested in this person named Cooper Hewitt? Because
Mm,
I kind of want to get at like that creative side that we all try to nurture. And when I look at your books, I think,
mhm,
man, I had no idea about any of this.
mhm,
And I think most people have no idea about any of this. But Audrey clearly became super fascinated and learned everything about it, it seems. Um, what I mean, that to me is just to me, that's mental health, actually, because you're just so, absorbed by your topic. Talk about that a little bit. I'd love to learn more.
mhm. Yeah, well, actually, I had started with an interest in eugenics because my daughter had been diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And I was reading about the history of insulin. Insulin's only been around for 100 years. And I read that diabetics were actually part of forced sterilization campaigns which
Mm,
really surprised me. And I thought, well, what was eugenics? What was this movement? And
So
so I was reading.
that caught you. You got surprised by something.
Yes, I did. I got surprised by that. Um, and eugenics was something I had not really learned about in school, either high school or college. It's kind of like this little known movement in American history. And so I kind of got sucked down the eugenics rabbit hole. And I was reading a book called Building a Better Race by Wendy Klein. And in that book, she had a chapter on Anne Cooper Hewitt, this heiress who had been sterilized by her mother. And I mean, the wheels were turning as I was reading the chapter, and I couldn't believe that there was not already a book about her, that there wasn't already a Netflix show about her. What really intrigued me, and what I often look for in books and in projects that I want to represent, is that it had this really sensational, splashy story, which is necessary today. But it also was intellectually probing. So it was, big and splashy and felt commercial, but it was also provocative and really illuminated parts of our history that I didn't know about. And so it had those two pieces. That's what really attracted me.
Wow. Yeah. That's 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 super amazing. And so this was like your, you mentioned earlier, this is sort of like your second act or your other act that you're doing as
Yes,
opposed to the career track you thought you would be on. And
right.
you found something that was you didn't know about it. It's something
Mhm.
you didn't know about. You didn't learn about it in school. That there you go. If you're all trying to write a book, write down 10 things that you're learning about now that you didn't know about in school.
Mhm.
That's probably a
Mhm.
great idea. Um,
And
yeah,
actually, the
and
piece of
yeah.
well, I was going to say this piece will interest you, Mick. Um, the the eugenicist who testified at Anne's trial in favor of her forced sterilization was the mentor of James Dobson.
Wow.
So that was my big research find in that piece was that the founder of Focus on the Family actually got his start at a pro eugenics institute in California. And it was not a secret that it was a eugenics institute. It was like in the language of the mission statement. That's how James Dobson cut his teeth. And so around the time that the book was published, I had an article about James Dobson's eugenics roots in um, Religion and Politics, which is now ARC magazine. And that went wider than any other press piece about the book. Kristen Kobes Dumais retweeted it. It's actually cited in her forthcoming book. Um, and a lot of evangelical scholars didn't even know about that aspect of Dobson's history.
Mm. Well, yeah, of course, he kept it pretty well hidden.
Yes. Yep.
And yeah, not gonna talk about anything like that. A little bit like the Nazi connection,
Yep.
what?
but in the conservative movement. But, but yeah, it's uncomfortable. It's deeply, unjust, right? The injustice, I guess, the part that intrigues me about your pursuing projects like this is the surprise that happens, the connection to your personal life with your daughter, and then
Mhm.
also just
Mm.
that sense of injustice that's deeply there's something deeply wrong that you kind of want to right that wrong or at least learn about it some more as an act of being or doing justice to these people whose stories have never been told.
Mhm.
Find
Say
that
say
fascinating.
say the title again of the book, the title and subtitle, Audrey?
It's The Unfit Heiress, The Tragic Life and Scandalous Sterilization of Anne Cooper Hewitt.
And it was published in 2021,
2021 by Grand Central.
Grand Central, which is part of Hachette. and it did really well too, as I understand it. So, as I think I've heard from you.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it sold as much as publishers like books to sell, but,
Right.
um
Right. But it was like, can you give a ballpark number for listeners? Like, what does that look like? If you were to
I
just throw a
think the
number out.
last time I checked, it had 25,000 sales, but many of them were digital sales that come from, like, when Kindle has a special and the book is 99 cents. So
Oh,
I don't know what the exact breakdown is.
yeah. Yeah,
Um,
that's a
But as you said,
publisher conversation.
yeah.
and scholars can refer to your work. I think there's a thing there with the historical element that allows it to have a longer shelf life often.
Mhm,
In educational settings, but it might be recommended in some classes. But as you get into deeper themes of eugenics and obviously with people coming out of cults and all kinds of discussions about deconstructing and evangelical movement, this is kind of on the rise. So I wouldn't expect. I mean, I would expect a lot of people finding new respect for such stories, and that it's been going on so long. I think that's another thing that's really reaffirming, especially as we look at like current day. This has been going on a long time. That these are not new ideas that we're coming up against. When you're looking at just political landscape of today, um,
mm.
there's historical roots to a lot of these injustices,
Yes.
and yeah, so I don't know. My hat's off to you. That's amazing. And digging down into something, I mean, you must get a lot of pleasure from that, right? And learning more about something. Just
Yeah,
curiosity.
I love to research. The research and the conceptualization is my favorite part of book
Mm,
writing. Because I am trained as an academic, I think I have much more tolerance for the historical asides and the kind of deep research in a book. And that's something that like readers complain about. If I go on Goodreads, they'll like stay on topic.
Oh,
Like they want just the main narrative and none of the context or very little of it.
sure. Yep.
Um, I want all the context to all the history.
Right. Yeah. Well,
how
and
many
you have
words
patience.
how many words was that first book? Do you remember?
About 73, not
So, yeah,
terribly long.
you couldn't
Yeah,
have meandered too much. Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then you had some that I mean, that's a pretty good number, even if it was a lot of Kindle special sales, that's still a
Mhm.
really good number. They couldn't have been that big of a percentage. Um, but then you were off to the races and your publisher wants another book and what's the title of your second book and when did that come out?
That came out 2 years later in 2023. Girls and Their Monsters, The Janine Quadruplets, and the Making of Madness in America. And that one was about a set of quadruplet sisters born in 1930 who all developed schizophrenia by their early 20s. And that caught the attention of researchers at the National Institute of Mental Health who studied them. And at first they thought, oh, this is proof of the genetics of mental illness because there's four of them. They have the same
Mm,
DNA. And come to find out that they had really lived in a house of horrors. They had been subjected to a lot of abuse within the home, and in some of the sisters' cases, at the hands of people in the community. But the narrative about the family was so sterling. Like they were just these picture perfect girls and a picture perfect family. They had a singing and dancing act, and they would tour and sing like these cute little folksy songs about America. And so it seemed to me like the community, the people of Michigan, and even the wider nation were very invested in this image of white American girlhood. And so they really became like these screens onto which the public projected all these fantasies, and that
mm.
really shrouded the reality of abuse within their home and with many white Christian homes. And so, what was special about that project is that one of the sisters was still living and she actually agreed to be interviewed. And that was one of the greatest privileges of my life, but also a great responsibility. I didn't have that with the first book because everyone was dead. It's a bigger weight to shoulder
Yes.
when someone
Yes.
is alive. Um, and what's really interesting about that book from a publishing perspective is it was much more widely covered by the legacy press. So it was reviewed in the New York Times, Associated Press, Washington Post, even in England in the Times Literary Supplement. But the sales were much fewer than with the first book.
Huh.
So I've
Huh.
always thought that was curious.
Yeah, that might be a mystery you never solve.
Yeah.
Sometimes I
Very
think,
storytelling.
if that first book caught on with and you mentioned Kristen Dumais, if it caught on with sort of the evangelical or ex-evangelical subculture as a fascination thing of regarding Dobson, there might have been a stream there because that can be a very tightly knit book community
Mhm.
that really gloms onto things. I don't know if that rings
Yeah,
true or
I
not,
don't know.
but
I don't
yeah,
know.
yeah, yeah. I'm always trying to figure out those little theories as to why a book really takes off as opposed to some
Mhm.
others. Um,
Let me know when you crack the code.
yeah, right. There there are some things that you can point to, but sometimes it's still very much a mystery. Um,
Mhm.
Yeah.
and I don't want to presume too much especially when I'm talking to the author of that book.
Mhm.
um, so how did you get on to that idea? So you just successfully published the first book. Now,
Mhm.
how did you get on to this next book, Girls and Their
I
Monsters?
have to give my mom credit for that. She had been reading Robert Kolker's bestseller, Hidden Valley Road, which was also about a big family. I think it was 12 kids, 6 of them had schizophrenia. And in that book, he very briefly mentioned the quads. And my mom said, "You should write your next book about them." And at first, I was not interested. I thought, what am I going to say about this nature nurture debate? I have nothing to offer. But when I Googled them, and saw the images of them. They really look like the Jean Bonnets from like
Mm,
long ago, just perfectly coiffed and put together. There was such a pageantry. I very quickly got sucked into the story. And even though, I'm not a scientist, I can't weigh in scientifically about the nature nurture debate. This was also a story about culture and about the myths that Americans and specifically white Americans tell themselves. And so that was my turf. I did feel, qualified to speak to that, to the mythology that surrounded the girls.
yeah, to show the the depth of the story, that is not something you're going to see in a psychiatric research paper,
Mhm.
and the connection that the nature that's the problem with psychology and nature nurture conversations is that they don't the weakness I would say is it doesn't always account for the power of culture to affect the individual mind.
Mhm.
For example, uh, if you study mental illness over the decades and the centuries, mental illness manifests in different ways depending
Mhm.
upon social structure and cultural structure. Um, just look it up; it's there,
Mhm.
but yet that's not always something you'll find in a statistically significant peer-reviewed experimental psychology research paper.
Right, and also, culture shapes scientific understanding of the disease. So one of the books that I uncovered in my research was, Jonathan Metzl's The Protest Psychosis, which talks
Mm,
about how over the last century, schizophrenia became coded as a Black disease in the civil rights era.
wow.
And it was associated with protest, with antagonists. And in the clinical imagination, it really went from being a white to a Black disease. And when it became a Black disease, what happened? Well, prisons replaced hospitals, and the policy around schizophrenia changed just because scientists had a different understanding of who was afflicted by it. So culture is shaping everything.
Mm.
So I want to get to the next project you want to work on as much as you're comfortable sharing about it.
Okay, sure.
But what do you think at this point in time, at that point in
Yeah.
time, after the second book had been out for a while, what was your understanding of publishing? Or what
Yeah.
were some takeaways you felt like you were working on?
Well, I think that I intuited how much scale and sensation matter, and I have conflicting feelings about that.
Hmm.
Um, I also
Scale meaning what?
like a
S-
big splashy story. A
Yeah,
mom who sterilized her daughters, 4 sisters who are abused and develop schizophrenia.
a
Uh,
sensational story that can scale, that can catch on. Yeah.
yes. Um, yes. And I think that um there is a lot of emphasis on nonfiction that unveils or exposes or pulls back the curtain. And that's what those 2 books do. They both like pull back the curtain on American history in a way that is revelatory for a lot of people and was revelatory for me as I was writing. I think like the further we get into Trumpism, I have questioned how much um, unveiling really changes things. Like, is it enough to point to American history and this history of violence? Is that enough? I think my mind has changed about that since those 2 books were published. And it's not enough to point. That nonfiction often needs to do more. And I don't know that traditional publishing is prepared to support the more.
Mhm.
Whoa,
Mm.
that's what do you think, Mick? That's pretty heavy.
That's super provocative. I just want to
Yeah.
dig down on that. But what? Say more.
Mhm,
Why do you think that is? I mean, what evidence of that do you see?
mhm. Um, I think that have you guys talked about that novel Yesteryear?
We haven't yet.
Okay. So
Example though.
Explain what it is. Yeah.
okay, so that is, a viral novel about a trad wife, which seems to be very thinly veiled, um, character, inspired by Ballerina Farm, a woman online who has, like, millions of followers. I think that the book, um, is beloved by many people for supposedly exposing the trad life, and there's a lot of criticism of it too. I think The New Yorker did a
Mm.
piece, about how it's just like rage bait, doesn't really help us to understand Christian women or understand trad wives or anything like that. But I think the book speaks to the appetite among many progressives to see conservatives humiliated, to see them exposed.
Yes, there's a stream of those kinds of books in the broader
Yes,
market publishing. Yep.
yes.
Mhm.
Um,
Not that we're
uh,
trying to defend conservatives, but that
no, not at
there's
all.
also a train wreck desire
There
to yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
And I think that, like, if we're really gonna climb out of this mess, that we need to move past exposing, humiliating, and do the harder work of dialogue and encounter. I really believe that. Um, and I think that there are not enough books being published that encourage people to do that hard work of dialogue and encounter. And for that reason, I don't really look to the publishing industry as a counterweight to Trumpism. I think it's doing more of the same.
It still wants the sensation that will scale.
Exactly. And that's what
Mhm.
Trumpism is. It's like scale, sensation, always exceeding yourself. Um,
Said bicycle jumps on the front lawn. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Bicycle jumps on the front lawn.
Yeah.
Um, I think like how do you counter that? You counter that with stories that are quiet, with voices that are tentative and questioning. And to ask a question is actually a really radical thing. I don't think there's enough nonfiction being published that is curious, that's exploratory. Um, People are publishing from a place of certainty,
Yeah.
which and with a kind of like table pounding authority. I don't think that's enough to counter Trumpism.
Mm.
In your books, you talk about how you were revealing, you were
Hmm.
pulling back the curtain. If you were with what you're saying now, how would you have approached them differently than you did before? Not that I'm asking you to feel regrets or anything. It's just to give us an example of what you mean by quieter voice, which is really cool.
Hmm.
Dialogue, being curious.
Hmm.
What ideas come to mind as to how you might have, or how you might
Done
do
that.
things different going forward? Either way.
Yeah. That's a really good question. Um, because I don't think that those books, as proud as I am of them and as important I think the work is of educating people about the past, I don't think that they really changed minds, you
Mm.
know? like um I think especially with the second book, Girls and Their Monsters, um I should have brought more to fore how much her faith, the living quadruplet's faith, um, was a means of survival for her.
Despite
And
it being perhaps a conservative, insular
exactly.
kind of
Exactly.
thing. Yeah,
Yeah, and I mean, it's nodded to in the book, and there's some parts in the conclusion about how her faith meant how much it meant to her. But I think I could have done more.
it's really interesting. Yeah,
Mm.
yeah. I
It's
I
a
I
life
I agree with that. Go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, no, it's a lifeline for a lot of people, and I think it's misunderstood by the people who are often, um, maybe on the stage or in the forefront of people's minds as representatives of religion or even faith in general. So in some ways, it's doing a disservice to those who have either left already or just are unaffiliated, um, because they're getting a wrong idea of what faith actually is. That's well said.
Exactly. Exactly. And, um, I got to see Kristen Kobes Dumais speak when she came to Pennsylvania. And, she made the point that Christian nationalism is theologically rooted. And so the antidote needs to be theological. And I really do believe that. I really think the people who are most equipped and who have been most successful at combating Trump do so from a position of moral authority. Pope Leo, this man who speaks softly, but just stands in the gospel. He has managed um, to undermine Trump in ways that the left could learn from.
Mm. Mic drop. It's quiet. Yeah,
It's hard to, yeah.
yeah.
Well, I think point it's hard to argue with someone who's just speaking confidently and quietly and knows there's
Yeah, and I think, like, It's I have such a complicated relationship with the Catholic Church, which is where I come from, because, I don't believe a lot of the doctrine, but I pay attention.
Yeah,
I read everything that Pope Leo and Pope Francis before him wrote. And I really think that the Pope's language of disarmament is like the word we need right
Mhm.
now. And I think about it in not to veer too far from this question of publishing, um, stories that disarm.
yeah,
Like, what does
Mm.
that look like?
yeah,
Um, Stories that can ask questions that don't profess to have all the answers. I think that's what we need more of. I really do.
yeah, yeah. There's a peaceful approach. There's a nonviolent approach, right, to capitalism.
Exactly.
Yeah, a lot of what you're pointing
Yeah.
to is the deep discomfort that David and I had with the risk averse sort
Yes.
of publishing tradition, that says we need it to be sensational, we need it to be
Yeah.
loud and proud. And uh, what about quiet and peaceful and nonviolent
Yeah.
and reflective, question
Mhm.
asking, the uncertain, even mystery, right, and
Yep.
wonder. And it's like those are given nods maybe once in a while. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, to actually make that front and center in a
Yeah.
publishing program would be amazing to see.
Yeah. I mean, I really think there is a vision of the human person embedded in the acquisitions process,
Mm,
and it is not morally neutral. When people acquire projects that are risk averse, that they think can be scaled and reproduced, and they're predictable, that's not just shaping the art. It's actually like putting forth an idea of the human person, that the human person is efficient.
right.
It's an author who already has visibility. So there's a measure of value that is attached to visibility. That the process of creation is not messy and full of friction. And so, again, to quote Pope Leo, one thing he said in his recent encyclical is that the problem with AI is more anthropological than technological. And I think
Mm,
like that logic applies to publishing. Like the problems are anthropological as much as they are aesthetic or anything else. And a lot of the discussion about the publishing industry talks about like bad art or, bad whatever. It's like there is a vision of of the human person that is being put forward by these publishing houses, and it has real material consequences
Yeah.
for human beings on this earth.
We absolutely experienced that in evangelical Christian publishing, which is very much about derivative content.
Mhm,
Who's repackaging the same tropes over and over again in new ways. There's just so much stuff that is just a copy of something else, that is being pushed by the person who is now using TikTok the best, or
mhm,
person who was using Twitter the best a while ago, or the person who is creating structuring churches and popular churches the best,
mhm.
or who's doing women's conferences the best. It all kind of shifts, but you look at the content, it's the same stuff they've been saying 25, 50 years ago. Um, and you really feel that what you just said about how, like, the anthropology of that. What is the commentary on the human person? I think that's why Mick and I aren't part of the reason why Mick and I aren't in it, whether by choice or not. You know, we're, I think most of us, whether we're in evangelical publishing or not, we really want to get at the human story,
Mhm,
but the systems don't always show it to you, and you've got to go find it. Yeah.
you mentioned cultural myths and narratives, right, that we are telling ourselves. And I think of them. I mean, this is simplistic and generalized, obviously, but just quickly encapsulate that story that's being told, maybe about the quadruplets or people with any marginalized status, right? Is this narrative, this cultural narrative, and if you dig down on that a little bit deeper, you find out there's a lot of deep injustice that they're suffering, and you
Mm.
start to learn the person underneath that whitewashed narrative, basically. And uh,
Mhm.
what I see publishing at the highest levels in traditional houses typically is not willing to look at. They want to keep the cultural narrative, just go off of
Mhm.
the splashy, like you said, story, and not dig down on things, not find that one person or the particular detailed stories. And yet, readers are people who love a particular specific
Mhm.
detailed story. And so there's this tension, right? Is always at work. And so I just love the language you're putting to this too, because to me, exactly what David is saying, the problem that we see in publishing is that they're trying to duplicate success. And obviously that they never can. You
Duplicate
can't,
success, right?
you don't know why something's sold. It's not going to work. So,
If
and
you
it
go to
never
certain
worked.
Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt. If you go to certain sections in a bookstore, like a broad market bookstore, you'll see like, oh wow, this is all this one topic area. Even might even be like really niche fiction kind of thing. Like romantasy is really driving a lot of the industry right now. In fact, there's bookstores opening now more than they ever were, indie bookstores, but it's because of the romantasy interest, the
Mm.
romance and fantasy genres, but also the hybrid of them. Um, or I'm thinking of another author right now that I've been working with who is publishing to a particular category area that you could see it on the bookshelves. I'm not going to name it right now. And this author has pitched something to a publisher who's taken it, but the publisher is pushing back saying you've got to fit better in the category.
Mhm.
And this author's like, "No, I know that category. I know it backwards and forwards and I have for years and years. I'm trying to do something within it that's different." And so there's that pressure. I think that as publishing people, we feel that pressure a lot, and we don't always, it's not it. There's this sort of idealistic idea about what an editor and an acquisitions team might be doing, but I was a publisher, so I gave Mick worked with me. Mick had 12 titles he had to acquire a year. He had to drive $3 million worth of revenue a year. You know,
Mhm.
that's how those conversations start on performance evaluations, and if you don't think that's not driving the way that you acquire things from a humanity, anthropological point of view, you're wrong. They do drive it quite a bit. I'm sorry, I'm going on and on now. So you talked about your background a little bit, Audrey. You grew up
Mhm.
Catholic, a pretty strict Catholic background,
Mhm.
and that has something to do with your next project. What what where are you right now with that? How are
Mhm.
you feeling about that? Let's put it that way.
Well, that one has evolved so much, I think, even since you read parts of it. So I grew up in the Lamb of God community, which was a covenant community in Baltimore, Maryland, that was part of what was called the wider Catholic Charismatic Renewal. And the charismatic renewal actually started as a progressive force in the wake of Vatican II, which was a council that really modernized the Catholic Church. So, for instance, um, n- changing the language of the Mass so that it wasn't in Latin, but it was in people's vernacular, uplifting lay people, saying that lay people have a greater role in the life of the church. There were all these reforms, changed attitudes toward Jewish people, because people understood what had happened with the Holocaust and the theological roots of anti-Semitism. So that started as a really modernizing force in the church, and I think it's a good thing to empower the laity. But what happened is then these lay figures kind of became like priests then, where they were very authoritative and dictatorial. And so I was part of this community that I think my parents joined because they kind of liked the hippie culture and everybody relying on each other, having this built in family. But that quickly became very rigid ideologically. There was a keen sense of like insiders versus outsiders. So even as a young person, I knew that like we were sanctified in a way that public school children weren't. And
Feels really familiar, by the way.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. And
including the hippie part.
the hippie part.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the priest who was part of this was eventually exposed, or credibly accused of molesting some women and children.
Mm.
And so I began it as a memoir of that community, that really was doing that work of unveiling, exposing, pulling back the curtain. But the more that I really began to study Pentecost, eh, I really was drawn to its like really disruptive hermeneutics. And I was surprised to find out how much Pentecost shaped even secular thinkers and movements.
You're saying disruptive hermeneutics of Pentecost itself,
Yes.
not of the
Yes.
movement. Okay, yeah.
Right. So, Pentecost, of course, it's from the book of Acts. After Jesus has ascended to heaven, the Holy Spirit comes down, people are like speaking in tongues and on fire. That image, that idea of Pentecost has really inspired a lot of revolutionaries across history.
Mm.
And if anything, Pentecost has been more associated with revolution than what I experienced, which was this very rigid, insular community. So Pentecost influenced, for instance, somebody like Hegel, the German philosopher, who really radically reconceptualized history and left an impact on philosophy that was picked up by Karl Marx and friends. And, even, like, there's a Slovenian philosopher today, Zizek, right? He's like a neo-Marxist who's picking up on Hegel, who's picking up on Pentecost. So Zizek is an atheist, and he nevertheless, standing outside Occupy Wall Street a decade or so ago, called upon the Holy Spirit to come galvanize the crowds outside Wall Street. And that's so curious to me. Why is this atheist neo Marxist invoking the tradition of Pentecost? That's just one example. I've found so many. I think also about Reverend William Barber at the
Mhm.
2016 National Convention. He gave a speech and he ended his speech by calling for fire from above. So Pentecost had a part at the DNC convention. So that's the book has gotten bigger than just thinking about my own experience in the Lamb of God to being a wider history of Pentecost and the way that it has inspired both believers and non-believers. Um, and it's slow going, but that's my writing project.
Sort of like where that inspiration can take you and how it could be used in maybe in exploitative ways versus revolutionary,
Mhm.
good disruption ways.
Yeah, I think the
Mm.
image of people speaking in tongues and that are kind of like spilling out of their bodies is a really radical one. Um, like just this idea of bodily difference, of a body that is not contained, that is on fire. That's radical.
Yeah. Mm. Sounds mystical. It sounds connected to psychedelic movement right now in a way, in my mind anyway.
Yeah, I'll have to look into that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's
Wow.
a lot of in there. I mean,
So you
politically,
and you've pitched this book too already, right? With an agent?
Yeah, so that
Yeah.
was an earlier version of it, and the feedback was really wonderful, and people were very moved by it, but they, as we've been saying, like, "Well, I don't know where this fits in," or, "I don't know how we would begin to market this. It's too unruly."
Mm,
Um, it's not something that they could easily figure out how to market or position. Um, so it's probably bound for a university press or
mhm.
uh, an independent press, and I'm fine with that.
But you would still call it narrative nonfiction, or you used a phrase with me once a long time ago, and I'm
Mhm.
not gonna remember it, but it was more like
Was it creative nonfiction?
no, it
No.
was more like you used the word reportage
Oh, I don't
or
know.
or even journalistic,
Mhm.
n like deep journalism.
Okay. Huh.
Yeah.
I'll have to think what that was.
So you maybe started with this book with the idea of trying to do
Yeah.
a revealing
Mhm.
and a sensational story that scales,
Yeah.
but now you're asking a bigger question, a more curious vein of thinking of is that right?
Yeah. I mean, maybe it's a conjuring, a come Holy Spirit.
mhm,
Um, I think that what has changed is realizing, um, that people really do need to feel inspired,
Mm,
to use the ghostly word here. Um, they want to feel sparked, they want to feel on fire and, like, run excitedly over the mountainside with good news. And, I think so many people, are bombarded with, like, catastrophizing headlines, with this sense that our enemies are damned forever, never to change. They're terrible people, and they always will be. As somebody who came from the Christian right and is no longer, I can't accept that kind of fixity of personhood. It's not, the story of my life or you too or many other people
mm,
that I've met. I believe in second chances, third, fourth, fifth chances. And so I wanna tell a story about people who are transformed. Um, and I also wanna, like, tell a story that finds a common language between secular and religious, sacred and profane, and that's another thing that attracts me to Pentecost is it already is a shared language, um, and so that's what I'm hoping to do with that.
mm, it's really cool. Yeah, well, in shared language, we're always trying to come up with ways to simplify that, and then, of course, it gets complexified again. I love that word, complexified. In spiritus, being inspired, that's another word I always come. You're right, absolutely. We have this long tradition in Christianity of God with us, and often that's not enough. We want God in us, and
Mhm,
I really felt recently that there is an absence of that in our culture, even just our cultural dialogue. We're
mhm.
suspect for good reason. I mean, obviously,
Yeah,
it's right, but you need something, and you will believe in something, like, regardless. Atheists even believe in something. So I do believe that there is this need for some sort of filling, whether that's of Pentecost or of God or something
mhm,
else that is greater than you or higher than you, something that inspires
yeah,
you to go running field and tell everybody about it, right? That's a human need. Uh, and yet if we need to take it seriously. Um, I feel like we don't. We do it a lot of disservice. I dismiss it all the time in my daily life. I don't need that. I'm
Mhm.
smarter than
Mm.
I don't need any. And yet, what do I do the very next moment? I'm looking for
Yeah.
something to fill that
Yeah.
need. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and I started it by saying I want to relax, want to take it easy. I'm looking to nature. I don't say it's God, but
Mhm.
there's need there, right? And that's just a human desire. So I love that, like, all of your projects seem to be getting at that in some way. Maybe just that spark of curiosity, right?
Mhm.
That you honor and you take seriously, and then you follow it and see where it leads. You know?
Mhm.
As publishing people looking for books, trying to shepherd book ideas forward, um, you know, we, we often like Mick and I have talked. I think we talked on the podcast too about how if you counted up all the Christian nationalism books that have been coming out the last 5 years, even like very recently, there's some coming all the way. I know one coming out in September. It's quite a bit, and as someone who's kind of really familiar with the topic and has been in it, knows it, knows the people in it, some of them directly. I'm kind of like, wow, do we really need another one of those? And where is that book? I loved what Audrey said, Nick, about where's that book about making people wanting to they want to be inspired, they want to run around the hill, they want to run around the mountainsides or the hilltops, whether that's a whether that's talking about Jesus or whatever, but they want to be have joy.
Yeah.
They wanna get involved in something that makes them ecstatic in a sense too. I think that's something of a bit of an American phenomenon, a fairly culturally rudderless society, as great as it might be economically. Um, yeah, I think that's what we're really challenged by. I've often said, we're really challenged by trying to find another one of those really deep like spiritual writers. You just don't see that going on right now like maybe you did 25 years ago or 50 years ago, like the Frederick Buechner type for today.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Who would that be? Or the Madeline L'Engle type, or even maybe more recently, the Barbara Brown Taylor type. You don't see that as much I mean, we'd love to see that more. Um, the curiosity and the way you can spin curiosity, whether it's a narrative nonfiction or a treatise on Pentecost or what have you.
Mhm.
And you're a publishing person too. Maybe we wrap up with that. So you're now a publishing person too. You work with me at Hyponymous
Mhm.
Literary, which has been a true delight. There's been some amazing projects come in just with just a handful of clients so far. You're fitting it into the rest of your life. It's something you approached me about. You wanted to do more of. Talk
Mhm.
about what your hope is with being a literary agent.
Mhm. Yeah,
And
thank you.
are you looking for proposals?
Yeah. Um, well, for the last few years, I've been with a company, Narratively Academy, and they teach a lot of writing and workshop classes. And so for them, I was already working one on one with a lot of authors, helping them to conceptualize book ideas, begin to write them, even put together a book proposal. And I felt like I was doing the work of an agent. And so that's when I went to David and made my plea um, for him to take me on as a mentee. And
A
he
really
very
tough
graciously,
decision, let me tell you.
yeah. Thank you. And I have so appreciated that opportunity and the freedom that David gives me and the trust that he has in me with the different projects that I'm drawn to. I think that like agenting really is a test of values because it's easy to like look at corporate publishing and say, you guys are so capitalistic. And and agenting is like you also have to make choices about projects, whether they're commercial or not. So I've given a lot of thought to like how can I be a disruptor, to use your word, but also like, not fail as an agent. And part of it is a willingness to take on projects that I know are bound for a smaller press or an indie. Part of it is giving authors a second chance or even a third chance, if possible. I think that, like, in the name of combating, like, the efficiency that is demanded of doers and creators today, you have to recognize that creation is messy and people it might take 10 times. So where possible, I do try to say to somebody, "It's not working now, but this might work. Come back
Mhm.
to me." Or, "This idea won't work, but if you have other nonfiction ideas, come to me." And it's a challenge, and I'm always, kind of trying to coax myself to do even more, to pave the way for authors, especially projects that I think are disruptive. The poets, the dreamers, the prophets out there. So I've only signed a few authors at this point. Have had one sale which hasn't been announced yet, so I won't get into it. And working with another client again, I won't say much, but
Mm.
David knows, who's pretty big, and I think that one will have more commercial potential, which I'll keep under wraps and announce later. Um, but yeah, I'm in a position of privilege too that I have other income from teaching and other things that I can afford to take on, the more out there unruly projects. So yeah, I'm grateful to David. I'm very excited. And
Likewise grateful and
yeah,
excited. Yeah.
yeah,
Go to hyponymous.com and
yep,
look up Audrey's bio. You can get her email there if you have a proposal to send. And you'll just have to guess at which authors she's referring to in our
yeah,
author list. It's just
yeah,
there. It's not set
yeah,
by agent. Yeah.
yeah.
But yeah, I have a good idea of your top just based on your topics. What has interested you and what you've written, and then other authors that will eventually pop up on your site, and then people can kind of take their cues from that to see what kind of things you're looking for. And are you open to queries? Is that part of the process?
Yes, I'm very limited right now because I'm still teaching it narratively. I'm still trying to make progress on my own book, but I am open. I still consider projects. Very interested in religion, philosophy, cultural criticism. Memoir's hard. It really is. But, I try to encourage people to do the memoir plus, where it's like you're braiding your personal story with this wider cultural inquiry that can be a little bit more successful today.
That's great. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, we're learn more of that. Yeah, thank you for being here. I mean, there's so much more I want to discuss, but we will do that. Let's have you back at some point. But yeah, thank you for being here. Thank you for all your insight and all you share and all you do for authors. It's excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you so
So yeah,
much for having me.
Describe Narratively Academy briefly.
Yes, they publish magazine type articles, but they also have, an academy which teaches writing classes and holds workshops for writers.
Right.
Actually, Sarah Mosliner just launched a workshop on writing about religious trauma there.
Hyponymous author. Yep.
Yep, she's another hyponymous author,
Author of
and
After Purity.
yep.
Hmm.
And so there's tons of classes. People should check it out. It's really wonderful.
Great.
That community makes me very excited.
Thank you, Audrey.
excellent.
Appreciate it.
Good deal.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That brilliant words definitely still sticking. Still sticking.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.